or afternoon, wherever you're watching from. And happy Halloween. It might take a second here for this video to kind of get warmed up and actually stream to all the different channels, but we are live, and today we'll be going over mostly some art critiques, but also a little bit of industry news. So feel free to add stuff in on the chat. And yeah, let's get into some cool artwork that I stumbled across recently. So before we get to that, let me actually tell you what I've been up to here. At CG Forge, you'll notice that Fluids 1 has now been released. So if you guys have ever felt really confused about fluid solvers, about flip solvers, the aim of this course is both to make it simple and also for advanced users to offer you something that will expand your existing workflows. In particular, I have some really interesting meshing techniques and some methods here for creating bubbles and foam that might interest you. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely make sure that you do, because that, I have to say, is probably one of my best courses to date. So I think you guys will really, really enjoy that. Okay, now on to some art critiques. This one here is from Nathan Tanderson. And I know it's a little bit small here. I kind of wish Instagram would let me like blow this up big for you guys. And what we have is a nice, cool rainy effect happening right here. So first impressions, I really love this overall effect. Also a very, very nice breakdown. I love it when you have all those different comp layers show up really fast. I'm just kind of a sucker for that whole progression when that happens. But let's talk about what's working well, what's not working well, or what could be improved, I should say. One thing that's working great is the integration into the environment. We have a nice ground plane right there. I'm not sure exactly what those warbles are on the ground, but I like it. I think it's realistic. And I think that the rain itself also looks cool. You know, another thing too I just noticed about this is when we take a look at that focal length, notice how it has a little bit of that fisheye effect going on. This isn't your standard 50 millimeter camera going on. And what's cool is that it kind of makes the edges of the frame kind of warp around a little bit. So I think that the wide angle, and I think that's what's happening here, I think the wide angle works really well for this scene. And on top of that, I think that in general, just the overall look of the rain looks great here as well. Now, when it comes to the look of the rain, one thing that is good to recognize is the fact that the use of volumetrics really brings out that rain. Actually, it just so happens to be, I have a quick tip coming out this month that talks about how to make rain and snow, more specifically snow. But one of the tricks that you can use to bring out that rain and snow is the fog, is the volumetrics. Because when you have that, it not only kind of back illuminates the rain that's in front of you, but it just creates a little zone or a little section that basically lights up the water from behind. And when that happens, it really brings out the shape of rain, which is difficult to do because if you ever take a look at like reference footage of rain, it's actually difficult to see rain. Also, fun fact, when you have like practical effects happening, they've oftentimes used like white dyed water or even milk to rain down on the actors to actually like bring out the rain when it gets filmed on camera, because it's really difficult to capture those fast moving specular highlights and reflections. Anyway, that's what's happening right here, and I think it's really good. Now, what could be improved about this? Because this is all about not only recognizing what works really well and all the awesome tricks that were used, but this is also about trying to figure out how we can make this better, right? The thing I would say that stood out to me is at the very end when we have a close-up of the raindrops falling down. In my opinion, I think the speed at which they fall down is too slow. So that needs to be about maybe 2-3 times faster in speed, in my opinion, to feel realistic. And on top of that, yes, you do have a fluid simulation that's coming off the car, and maybe that is technically impressive. But when we look at reference, pretty much the only thing we perceive, for the most part, is a water droplet just kind of quickly bouncing off. and you don't really just see it slide down like, a droplet would like on a frosty beer glass or something like that. And that's kind of more what's happening right here. So I would just say that for improving this shot, everything looks great, but I would just turn up the speed of that water, and I would make it feel less like it's clinging onto the car and a little bit more just like a quick little spray of water. I think that might sell it a little bit better in this situation. But all in all, really fantastic project, and great job, Nathan, for making all this and sharing it. Okay, here's the next one I ran into. This is by Max Schweiger. I think that's how you say it. Schweiger? Schweiger? Whatever that might be. This is a really awesome piece, though. And again, I apologize if it's not big enough on your screen here. But what we have is a nice little cocktail, like a little Halloween, little spritzer going on. It looks pretty good, honestly. And well, okay, so there's many things that I really, really like about this. One of the first things that I noticed was just how nice these refractions are, and how nice all of this light is that's being cast onto the wall and on the table. The fact that we have, it looks like some rosemary or thyme leaves or something like that going into that light, I think was a nice decision. I think it just adds more interest to the object. And that's actually something, by the way, that you want to think about when you're set dressing. It's not just like, hey, what does the composition do? But how is this object going to play with the lights in the scene? Because if you can do that, then it really just makes all the different objects feel more complex. Because, imagine we had these leaves right behind the cocktail glass. It wouldn't have as much complexity. It wouldn't really fit as well. It wouldn't be as interesting, in part because of the fact that light wouldn't be shining down onto the tips along here. And if that wasn't happening, then you wouldn't see as much complexity when that goes to sit on the table and be a part of the frame. So I really think that that's a cool, subtle thing to maybe pick out. As far as the simulation itself, it looks awesome. We have the bubbles, they're going up. We have bubbles clinging to the bottom right here. I would say for the bubbles clinging on the bottom, it would be nice to occasionally see them come and go, like have them pop. And that might be happening, but I don't think it is. I think we just have one layer of bubbles that's permanently there. So it would be nice to have them kind of gradually spawn and pop a little bit. It's just kind of a detailed thing. But all in all, pretty darn good. And yeah, the shading is great on this. I love the bubbles that are collecting on the rim right here. One of the things I talk about in my fluids course is just how when it comes to white water and bubbles, and when it comes to all of this, it's really all about looking at reference and trying to dissect what you're actually seeing, and then make custom setups based on what you're seeing. Because I think far too often we just rely on the pre-built like foam solver or whitewater solver in Houdini, but that's only going to give you like a very specific kind of look. And more often than not, when you have a situation like this as an example, then you have to make a custom solution for what you're seeing. And that's usually a better mindset to get into when it comes to bubbles and foam in particular. So anyway, that simulation is really, really awesome. I can't tell based on this render right here, but we might also have tiny little splashes coming out of those bubbles. And yeah, so if we have little tiny splashes, that'd be really awesome. Not sure if that's there or not. But yeah, got the bubbles. That's looking really awesome. So all in all, great project. I guess the next question is, what could improve this sort of thing? And honestly, it's kind of difficult to say, because I think that everything's working out pretty well. If I really had to be picky, I might try to switch up this backdrop a little bit and have something different instead of just these beige walls and like a beige countertop. I think if you had something a bit more interesting there, it would add a lot to this scene. Maybe like a wooden table, or I don't know. That's my personal taste of what might improve this. But all in all, yeah, this looks pretty awesome. So great job, Max. Okay, so next up, we have this user right here, Anonymous Societe, something like that. And yeah, we have this like almost like melty chocolate looking thing against a rock, which is very interesting. So as far as like a viscous fluid sim goes, this is actually really cool. It's very stable, except for that little pop there that I just saw. And when it comes to these thick viscous fluids, I think the hard thing about that is to, again, make it stable. Make it so that, it's not just popping left and right, that it's not like twitching as it simulates. I think we do actually have one of those pops happen like down here, just a little bit. I mean, just for a split second, it was like that. And that was like zoomed up. So all in all, that's pretty cool. But let's talk about the concept here for a second. I'm not sure if this is like, my first impression was chocolate, but maybe it's not chocolate. Maybe this is like a molten lava of some kind. And it's going against, or like a molten lead of some kind. And it's going against this fuzzy, rocky concrete thing. So it's cool. It's abstract. I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to take from it. And this also just kind of comes down to personal taste. Like, I know some people really enjoy artworks that are hard to understand. And that's kind of like the gist of a lot of abstract art, right? You're supposed to like have your own interpretation and like, I guess, figure out what it's supposed to mean, or figure out, I guess, what it's supposed to do. As far as like this whole shot goes, I think it looks just cool in general. I think the lighting's nice. I think that there's a lot of great stuff going on. But again, what is this? I couldn't tell you. I would have to start making stuff up. Maybe this is a logo or something like that. But anyway, here nor there, I would try to maybe have something that brings a little bit of context, a little bit of identification or purpose to what this is, because everything is really beautiful here. But I do think that I just don't know what it is. So, and that's, again, that's my personal taste. I like stuff that I can at least know what it is to an extent. Just because I can have more to work with, I guess, when I'm trying to figure out what it is. But anyway, here nor there, that's all cool stuff. Okay, so before we continue on with these different critiques or, constructive critiques, let's actually switch over to some news. I don't really have that much for you guys today. Unfortunately, I was kind of pressed for time for this month's Weekly Wrangle, but there are a couple of really cool developments that you should know about. One of which is that Axiom 3 has been released, which is really, really awesome. If you guys have taken my Pyro course, you'll know that I'm a big, big fan of the Axiom solver. And that's because it simulates faster. That's because the workflow is easier. And no, they did not pay me to say that, but that is just a fact. It's a really well-built solver right here. And if you guys have never tried it out and you do a lot of Pyro work, then you definitely need to check all of this out. Check out what Matt Puchala has been doing. Now, in this new version, it looks like there's some optimizations that have been made. So, main new feature includes a native CUDA support with NVIDIA GPUs. So that's a pretty big deal. It also has Apple Silicon support, 16-bit fields, a drag force, improvements to source shapes, and performance optimizations. So from my understanding, this 16-bit grid is pretty cool because you can get basically the same looking explosions, but you can just simulate it way faster because not as much data is being chewed on by the solver. So that's a really great optimization right there in and of itself. And yeah, you also take up less memory. So this takes up 36% less memory when it uses the lower bit grids. So if you guys have a GPU and you want to crank up the resolution without breaking your VRAM, then that's what this new version has to offer, which is really great. So yeah, be sure to check that out. I think it is definitely worth your time. And yeah, there you go. That's what's going on there. Next up, we also have the Witcher remake being announced. And this is pretty awesome because I'm a big fan of The Witcher, and I believe this is being made inside of Unreal Engine, which is even cooler. I mean, yeah, I can't wait to see what they come up with here. I mean, the original Witcher was already a beautiful game, but the fact that they're doing this in Unreal Engine now, and I think they're actually remaking the first Witcher series as well. So that's really exciting. That's really, really cool. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. It's going to be off in the distance. I don't know when it'll be released. I don't think they do either, but it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so this is a question here from Panda. Can Houdini use a 16-bit sim? Yes, it can. I don't think it does so natively, but basically put when something is 16 bits, you're just feeding it VDB values that are 16 bits. So actually, because Houdini doesn't use VDBs in their solver, I'm not sure if you can actually, because I know with VDBs you can do like 32 or 16 bits data on it, but I'm not actually entirely sure for regular volumes if it works in the same way. I know one thing that Side Effects has done to improve the optimizations has been to basically down res certain fields. Like I think with Houdini 19.5, there's a feature in there now that allows you to, let's say, take your velocity field and set that to like a 0.5 size or 0.5 multiply against the division size. Sorry, it allows you to take the voxel size and double it for that specific field. That's probably a better way of saying that. But yes, that's mainly how Side Effects has done that. It's not the same as doing 16-bit, but there you go. It would have to be something you have to play with. This might, again, be something that's only really available with using VDBs. And at the moment, Houdini does not use VDBs in any of the Pyro solvers. So that is kind of cool. All right. Well, let's go back to some art critiques over here. And thanks for asking that question there, Panda. That was a good one. This one here is Magical Land by Sedk Sayem. I think that's, hopefully I said your name right. I'm always terrible with names, so I apologize in advance. Because this is on YouTube, we can actually see this here in full screen, which is awesome. This is some environment work. Let's check it out. So yeah. Really cool. I like it. Yeah, so I guess first impressions here is that this looks really cool. This looks really awesome. I love the different colors happening right here. And I think that this is definitely like catching a cool vibe, especially when it comes to the lighting. The lighting is super, super important when it comes to these big scaled environments because it has to feel big. It has to feel like you're going way far back out into the distance. The challenge with these large scale environments is to make them feel large scale, is to make everything feel like it should be the appropriate scale. And in this case, there are a couple of areas that are not quite right, but there is a lot of stuff that is right. So let's kind of talk about those things real quick and maybe get a sense on both how this can be improved and how you can also approach a similar situation yourself without running into scale issues. So the first thing I do when I'm trying to figure out like the scale of things and like how big they should be is I start comparing objects to one another. So let's take like a tiny little shrub over here and compare that to a tree. It looks pretty right. You know, maybe a shrub is about that big, a tree is about that big. Generally, that's pretty good. Let's go up here to this little house up here. I think that in general, we're still looking pretty decent. A little shrub right there. That might be about the size of, you know, a third of, of one story here of this building. But where I think a lot of folks have bigger struggles is when it comes to the textures. And we can actually see this, I think, falling apart a little bit here on this cliff face. I think that the rock texture here looks cool, but I don't think that it's actually looking quite like a large scaled like cliff. It actually works a lot better back here, in my opinion, when we have this going on. But it looks like we have more like a close-up texture of a rock happening along these cliff faces. And when that happens, it's very subtle, but it totally happens where it's like a tiny little detail from a texture then gets compared to like a tree right next to it, and it looks off. So even just that little speck of texture that is like a little pebble, like in a rock texture, when that gets placed next to a tree, then that can oftentimes, break the scale in our subconscious as we experience these different things. So I would watch out for that, as well as the mountains back here are starting to get a little bit blobby and probably could use a bit more of detail, I would say. But this cliff face is working a lot better. And I think the reason why is because these shapes make more sense for the detail we would expect for a mountain that's way back there. So if you took like this kind of detail and you put it along this face that's more lit up, I think that would help improve the scale quite a bit here. Also, let's go ahead and play forward here and talk about some other things. Also, again, when it comes to the lighting, I do love the choice of having it come from the left, kind of make a dark light contrast to really bring attention to this area. That's really, really good. The volumetrics are nice, but the other thing you have to do is make sure that volumetrics primarily happen like further out into the distance. And so what makes something far away is the contrast between not having volumetrics to something that's close and then having volumetrics to something that's really, really far away. And we probably could push that a little bit more right here to make it feel bigger in scale. But that's really cool. I think the camera motion's a little bit, too CG feeling. So I would probably try to work on that a little bit. The river looks really great. I would probably add a little bit more lighting just to define these shapes a bit more. Maybe coming over with a top right light to just highlight these shapes. Even if it's a little bit subtle and not realistic, that might be able to help us read what's happening right here. But as we go forward, we have all of this, and there we go. Now, these volumetrics do need some help on the shading a little bit. We have these gray, what would you call it, like outlines happening along here. So depending on the render engine that was being used, it would be nice to have the light rays go through the cloud or kind of backlight the cloud right there, so that we have more of like a glowy cloud instead of a gray outline happening. But anyway, all in all, this is really, really cool stuff. Great job. And I really dig the vibe that was captured here. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I think, about maybe 2 or 3 more here, you guys. Again, if you have any questions or comments you want to add, feel free to shoot it in there. It could be about the art critiques, or it could be about, whatever. CG Forge, doesn't matter. But anyway, this is a new render that was done by Tim. And many of you guys might know Tim. He, I believe he creates a lot of tutorials here. So yeah, this here is this cool little plant growth deal and some lighting experiments. So yeah, a nice cool little R&D project right here. I know that with R&D projects, the goal isn't always to have like a full, complete project, or like a, 100% going 100% the mile, right? So when I offer ideas and constructive critiques, like, I'm sure he knows about many different things. But I actually kind of like the fact that the rock is not shaded here. And the reason why is because it brings out the colors of this like growth that's happening, this kind of like lichen looking growth, which is really cool. Also, I think it's cool that that lichen growth has these like bright saturated colors that pop out. One thing I think could be improved is just changing up the variety of colors a bit more. I think it could use a little bit less of this monochromatic vibe going on. But I do love having this abstract feel, again, with the white rock, the white backdrop, and this, it definitely creates a vibe. One thing I think that would push that vibe even further is some harsh lighting, which kind of happens along here a little bit. So I think that this was kind of heading in the right direction, but I think it could just use um, a bit more just lights, a bit more of like a rim, a bit more of like a direction going on, you know? um, so yeah, I think like this is a good place to start with a lighting setup, but just keep going is what I would say is pretty cool. As a matter of fact, take this and combine it with that, and you'll start getting some interesting things. So I think that could be something right there. And then I guess last but not least, a constructive critique would be for the backdrop, just to have a little bit of like a bump map or a little bit of something to catch light so it isn't just a flat color. I think that always goes a really long way here as well. But it looks like this might be some L systems potentially. I can't really tell. Or some kind of fur system, perhaps. So I really, as far as just like the actual effects go, like as far as the Houdini builds, I think that this is a cool looking experiment. And yeah, I don't know. I've never actually tried combining like a hair system with L systems before, but that'd be pretty cool. So yeah, yeah, it's cool stuff. So great job, Tim. Okay. Let's check out this one. This is by Split VZN, Bioluminescence. And this actually takes after a very famous 3D artist, Luke Penry, who comes up with these really awesome, like mushroom, like close-up mushroom effects, like this kind of stuff. I think I've actually talked about his stuff before, but just this crazy, wicked mushroom experiments. It's really cool stuff if you haven't checked out Luke's work. Anyway, this was inspired by Luke. And yeah, we have this really cool like zero gravity thing happening, which I love. I love it when you have the zero gravity thing because it's just cool. It makes the movement cool. It makes it almost mesmerizing, right? It's like when you check out the NASA astronauts in space, just kind of floating around. It's just something mesmerizing when you see zero gravity happen. And that's pretty much what's happening right here. Similar kind of ordeal. I love the soft body deformation that's happening as well in this area, in this bulbous area. And one thing I'm thinking about here, you guys, is I'm thinking about doing a vellum course. And one of the things in vellum that I've always thought was cool is that soft body deformation, especially if you can like put it into a scene kind of like this. So let me know if you guys would like to see a vellum course in the near future, but also if doing some kind of close-up plant thing like this would be something you'd be interested in trying out. I think this is an awesome example of soft body deformation and something cool that you can do with vellum that looks great. So yeah, love that evolution of the effect. The fact that we have the lights glow on at the very end is also really, really cool. And, it just, the whole thing progresses, right? There's a progression that happens. It's not like it's just one effect and then it's done. We actually see multiple effects. The vellum happens, then we have the strands come out, then we have the crazy zero gravity, and then we have everything light up. And so as you're working on your own simulations, my recommendation would be to pay attention to the layering, to the progression of your effects, and try to make it something that evolves over time like this, because those effects always just draw you in. It always keeps you sucked in when you see effect after effect after effect happen. And that's really kind of also another aspect that takes somebody's work from junior to a more professional level of quality, in my opinion. Anyway, I've said a lot of kind things. Now let's tear it apart. No, I'm kidding. Let's offer some constructive critique here and figure out what could be improved. So to start things off, what could I be picky about? Actually, one thing that did stand out to me a little bit was the shading on the strands themselves. It's not bad, but I think it could be, potentially a bit better. especially if we look at the areas in which the strands are supposed to interact with the plant itself. We'll notice some interpenetrating geometry a little bit. We'll notice that it doesn't easily blend into the actual plants. So I think if you wanted to take the shading to the next level here, a good idea is to maybe take the strand when it's closer to the plant and turn it into more of that shader, more of this like almost like a papery kind of material, and then have it turn into more of the actual blue strands like gradually. So instead of going like pure blue to this like wasp paper stuff, you make that like blend in a little bit more. That would definitely, I think, improve this. And the other thing as well, on just more of a technical note, if we're getting really, really picky here, is that we do have some strands that kind of find their way away from the mesh at certain points. It's very subtle, not easily noticed. This would be, very low on priority in my opinion, but that is there a little bit. And also on the animation, I love the zero gravity, but maybe when it first has that movement, we can actually have it be a little bit more responsive when it moves for the first time, and then it becomes zero gravity. So those are a couple changes I personally would make in this situation. But all in all, again, I really love this project. So great job, Split. And you definitely, I think, captured the essence of what Luke Penry does with his stuff here with this project. So great job. Okay, one more thing here, you guys, and that is going to be from Andrea Philippon, I believe. Looks like this might be an L Systems ordeal. Looks like this might be maybe just a good old copy to points situation happening. I'm not really sure. But this is a cool little pine tree, little pink pine tree going on. I love the fact that it's a pink pine tree, by the way, and that it has these little bulbs that come out. It looks like a otherworldly plant life, which I really think is always a fun premise for a project. Now, as far as things to improve, again, I always talk about plain backdrops. I think you should at least have a little bit of texture in the backdrop when you have one there. And also, I'm not the biggest fan of whatever this is. It's like coming out of the stone. And maybe this is part of the artwork. Maybe this is something trying to make a statement of some kind. Say, plants should come out of concrete and come out of like man-made, creations or something like that. So I don't mean to stomp on the artistic integrity of what you're trying to communicate here, but just in general, as far as the look of it goes, I think it could be improved. And I think maybe one thing that would improve it, again, is just being able to identify what this is down here a little bit better. So if it was me, instead of doing like this abstract shape, I'd maybe have like, if I was doing like concrete or something, I'd have this coming out of like a statue. And if you had like a hand of a statue that was coming out, like that could be a cool idea, or something again that we can identify a little bit more easily. So I think that would improve it. The other thing as well is just having a bit more variety on these tiny little ground dudes, both in color, in shape, and rotation. I think it just needs a lot more variety right there. And it kind of takes away from the main attraction right here, which is this guy. I do love how it actually kind of like, continues to warp a little bit here towards the end. It's like even more trippy when that happens. I would make that a bit more subtle. And again, I would randomize stuff down here. But as far as the tree itself goes, really, really cool. I love how it unfurls. It kind of unfolds like that. That's also a major plus. So great job on that. And yeah, all in all, I think it's a successful project. So great job, Andrea. Also, I think that's about it, guys. And yeah, thanks for commenting here, Nelson. It's good to see you. And yeah, so in the future, what I'll be doing right now, I'm kind of between like doing another flip course with like large bodies of water and getting into vellum. So if you guys are watching here, let me know what you might prefer here in the future. I'm kind of going back and forth on what's coming next. But one thing that is for sure going to happen here in the next week or two is I'll be making some more quick tips as part of the bonus section of Fluids 1. So if you guys are into fluids and you want to check out things like the SOP solver, the vellum fluid solver, the POP fluid node, I'll be getting into all of those different things, talking about the pros and cons. And I plan on half of it being available for free to tease the course. And then the other half is going to be for folks that are part of CG Forge, that have subscribed or bought the course. So again, let me know what you guys would like to see. I hope that these critiques are fun and useful. And yeah, I suppose that's about it for this month's Weekly Wrangle. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, I hope you guys have a fantastic day and a fantastic month of November. I'll see you later.